everyone, and welcome to Happy Synthesizers, a podcast about singing robots. I'm your host, Kay, and today I'll be speaking with producer ChulipP. Chulip has, by her own words, become a die-hard vocal synth fan in the last year or so, and has since released several original Vocaloid songs with singers like Gumi V6, Fukase, and Hatsune Miku. Her newest work, and her first to feature a full PV, is Tenshi Crisis Line with Kagami ni Len, which will be released within a couple weeks of this episode. So, here to talk about Len, and then some, Chulip, please introduce yourself.
Hi, you did a pretty good job of introducing me, I'd say so. Yep. I do love to make music. I like to make silly little songs, and vocal synths have become a really good outlet for me to, explore my musicality and my different ways of writing. So I don't really know what else to say. I'm here. Hello.
Hello. I was wondering, where does your producer name come from? I'm reminded of, this is so dumb, like a stereotypical lower-class Londoner's pronunciation of tulips. Like, look here, you gotta listen to this artist I found on YouTube. They're called ChulipP.
That is actually, exactly why I chose it. Because, so the name comes from when I changed up my username in 2020 when I became a VTuber. And I was a spider-themed VTuber. To this day, my Sona is still, a tarantula. And the name I came up with was ChulipP. Like tarantula, ChulipP. And so when I stopped VTubing, that name just kind of carried on because that's what a lot of my friends knew me as. And so I just needed to find different ways to morph it. And so I was like, I guess ChulipP is cute. I'll do that. And then I did. And then now all of a sudden people confuse me with a PS2 game that seems pretty good, but I've never played. So yeah, that's kind of how it came around.
I know very little about video games, so when you mention it, I'm on another level behind you. I was like, PlayStation 2 game, what?
There is a PlayStation 2 game named ChulipP, which is about delivering love letters.
Oh, that's cute.
I know this. It is cute. I like the art style. But if you Google my name, that's going to be half of the results, so...
Fair enough. I mean, consider poor Ghost. I mean, that's
true.
That's a pretty generic term.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm a bit more lucky in that part, and yes, I do Google myself occasionally. Give me a break.
We've all done it.
Yeah. No, I found out I popped up on a few subreddits, my songs, so that was pretty cool. So, yay.
So, like I said at the top, you haven't necessarily been into vocal synth for that long, but, how did you first discover this sort of thing? Do you remember, I don't know, what song you heard first?
So I do, back when I was 12 in 2014, I was at the height of my weeb phase, and being in your weeb phase comes along with sort of just getting into Vocaloid, at least a little bit. You have to do it to some degree. And so I heard a lot of the most basic songs that you could probably pick. World Is Mine, Magnet, and Plus Boy, which was my favorite, despite, how I may feel about the lyrics now. It was my favorite then.
It's a high energy song. I don't blame you.
Yeah. No, it's so catchy. And I was like, this is so catchy. I'm putting this on my MP3 player. The iPod Touch was out at that point, but I just had an MP3 player. A little old one.
I mean, fair enough.
But I put
12.
it on my MP3 player. I was 12. That is true. And then, so, yeah, that was how, it started, and it's been, in the back of my mind. But you know how things are when you, grow up, you, shun yourself because you were too cringe? When I was 12, because it was the height of my weeb phase, as I, went into high school, I was like, I can't. I gotta, this is the past. I gotta shrug it off. I gotta say I was a stupid child for liking any of those things. So that included Vocaloid. And I only got back into it very recently, as you said, within the past year. But I'm more into it now than I've ever been. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, the cringe, it's a lamentable instinct, but one that I think most people can understand. And on that note, so the earliest song that's currently public on your YouTube channel is Shoreline with Len, and that's only been out for a few months, but it says right in its description that it's a remaster of an old work. So how long have you been composing music, whether it's for Vocaloid or just in general?
So I've been composing music since late 2021. It happened after I dropped out of my first attempt at higher education, and things weren't going great for me, and I really needed like a way to express it. I've been writing songs since I was very, very little, like very small. I'm talking like 6 years old, recording into Audacity on my dad's computer, just like a song with basically nonsense lyrics, like a bad AI generated song almost, because it was just me as a kid just taking little bits and pieces that I heard from pop songs on the radio and just slotting them into the lyrics in order to create something that sounds like music. But as I grew up, when I was 13 especially, I started writing songs down on paper just to sing, but I didn't really have the ability to put background music to it. I never like joined a band or anything, and I didn't really have any like instrument skills, so they just kind of sat on paper. But someone that I knew very briefly gave me the opportunity to teach me how to get started within composing. And once I did that, it just like I was able to just release some tracks I made by myself, and it felt so, so good. If we're talking Shoreline, though, Shoreline was originally released in 2022. And in 2022, that was one of the worst years of my life. And so I was doing like a lot of songwriting in order to cope with it. But I wanted to write like a song that just didn't feel like it was in my voice. And so I ended up writing this like happy little song, this cute little song about like a little mermaid boy who's in love with someone who comes to the beach often but doesn't think that they can be together. And I was like, this is in my head. I like this song. But if I sing it, I feel like it'll be like it doesn't come from me, you know?
Ironically less authentic if it's coming from you.
Yeah, exactly. And my friend and frequent collaborator, Puff Vesynth, who's been doing like vocal synth stuff for a long time. We were just becoming like good friends then. And so I was like, hey, do you think that like you could maybe put Len on this track for me? And like he was like, sure. Hell yeah. And that's sort of how it got released, is I put it up on Puff's channel, actually. And it didn't really do much. No one really liked it. I liked it. The mixing was really bad, though, but that's just sort of like the process of, you know, just starting out composing. You know, you learn over time.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any producer whose first song had good mixing. Like, I haven't written much music, but I certainly won't pretend that I have good mixing on the things that I've done.
Yeah. And so I put it out there, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite songs that I've written. I think it sounds just so pretty and summery. But it just kind of sat there and didn't really do much. And I actually got kind of discouraged because I looked at the song up on Vocaloid database, and it wasn't attributed to me at all. It was just attributed to Puff.
Oh boy.
Even though it was, you know, it was my song, and Puff just kind of, you know, I really appreciated that he would make the tuning and the vocal synth for me, but it just kind of felt bad, I guess, to just like have your work attributed to another person and just kind of feel erased. And so that discouraged me a bit more. And I just sort of went back to writing more personal and dark songs about where I was at instead of, you know, just speaking with the character again. And so I did a lot of singing with my voice. But I started doing vocal synth stuff again in like early 2024. And that's when I released Bloodsucker. But again, I released it and it didn't really do much with it. I just kind of threw it on Bandcamp and no one listened to it, and that's fine. That was sort of par for the course for my music at the time. And so I just kind of let it sit there. But again, Puff and I, like, we started getting, like, close again, and we started listening to more Vocaloid together. And I started just listening to it on my own time and searching out more on my own time. And I was like, I really want to do this. I really want to make some songs with vocal synths. And so that's when I opened up the channel.
Nice. And on that note, I was hoping to ask you a bit about just the process of how you go about making these songs. I mean, every artist sort of has their own way of doing things. So technical stuff first, like what kind of software do you use? Like what's your DAW? How do you decide which voice bank you're going to use? That sort of thing.
So the DAW uses Reaper, which is a very unconventional choice. It's mostly used by mixers.
I think, do you know Cora Sunday wrote that song?
Yeah.
I believe that she uses Reaper, but she's the only other person I can think of who does.
Exactly. When I checked like that Vocaloid DAW thread that was like going around on Twitter for a bit, that was like one person used Reaper. And I was like, oh, cool. I could join that club, I guess, you know? But yeah, I've used Reaper for the longest time. I haven't really gotten like the impulse to, you know, migrate over to something more traditional like Logic or FL Studio. Although I am learning Logic right now as mandated by the music program that I'm currently doing at my college. So I have been touching Logic, but Reaper just feels right to me because I've been doing it for so long, and that's where I started because it was free. Well, free in quotation marks. So as far as DAW, that's what I use. And when I'm picking voice banks, I'm going to be so real with you. It is the probably least musically inclined choice of all time, because the first criteria I consider, let me walk you through it. Is it a love song? If so, it needs to be gay. I need to pick a voice bank that would make it gay, depending on who I'm writing about as a bisexual person. So I gotta make it gay. That's how it starts. And then from there, I'm like, who do I want to work with? Because a lot of the time I'm just like, who are some Vocaloids that I like that I necessarily would want to have on a song? And then I narrow that down to whose voice I think would fit it the best. And then I go from there and I just slot them in and see how I like it. That's just generally how I pick them. Based off of who I have the most personal attachment to, or who sounds good and I've been wanting to do something with. It's not usually like I make the song and then my primary consideration is who would sound best on this. It's usually I'm writing the song, I get like a picture in my head of who I'd like to work with, and then go from there.
That makes sense. I definitely understand that impulse. And as for, making the love songs gay, clearly what you need to do is to get a voice bank whose character is canonically non-binary, and then it's, Schrodinger's gay. Surprise, it's always gay. Get Saros or Nil on that track. And but on the other hand, you mentioned sort of getting a picture in your head and a vibe. Is there any sort of routine you tend to fall into while cultivating an idea into a full song? I mean, like some artists sort of swear by, oh, you start with the bass line and build from there. Or is it just sort of different every time?
There's like a couple of different patterns that I fall into. I'd say that the most prominent one is 3 a.m. I can't fall asleep. I get a melody stuck in my head and I record it on my phone, and then go back to sleep. I'm gonna see if this is here. That's just like from my phone, something that I recorded randomly. The next day I woke up and I was like, I'm gonna figure out what key this melody is in, and then I'm gonna write in order to accommodate it. And sometimes starting with the melody, I do have like emotions that I feel like it evokes and like that I want to capture. And then from that emotion, I just sort of branch off into making the story really, and really understanding where I want to come at this song from, the perspective, and that influences my musical direction. But also sometimes I just want to like try a new genre, and I'll just listen to songs in that genre, and I'll sort of like imitate in my own way. And then just as I get like a feel for it, I just start importing like Chulip touches, which is usually more future based type elements. So like a bit of a hybrid of different things. And so those are really the two modes that I'd say I fall into. Sometimes, very rarely, I'm just like, I'm bored. I'm just going to hop into the DAW and just see what happens. I'd say if we're talking about what I start with first, usually drums. It's usually drums.
Interesting. And on the note of drums and instruments and genre and stuff, what sort of music do you tend to listen to on the regular? Like, do you have any artists that you say have been a big inspiration for your work?
So if we're talking, I'm going to talk vocal synth artists and non-vocal synth artists.
Please.
I'd say that my biggest influences on all of my music from the start have been like artists I really love, who I was actually going to bring up later in a future question, so we'll circle back to that. But Cara Bonito, huge influence for me. Really, really love their songs, and their later albums are just really all about storytelling, and that's something that I pride myself on. I feel like they're storytellers in their own way, and so I want to capture that. And also they work with a lot of whimsical synths, and whimsical synths, I'm all about that. And then other artists that really inspire me are like Charlie XCX, because I'm a basic little gay bitch.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yep, nothing wrong with that. And Angel Till I Die. Sorry. And also for a time, Rina Sawayama was a big inspiration to me. And also I'd like to shout out Food House, Fraxium, and Alice Onyu Gao. Those are like queer hyperpop artists that I really, really, really love. I think that their lyrical perspective is so good, and I just love their sense of production as well. So yeah, if we're moving over to vocal synth artists, number one, Flavor Foley. Love Flavor Foley so much. I genuinely don't think I'd be making vocal synth music as often as I am right now if it wasn't for Flavor Foley. Really. Like, I just really, their lyricism to me is just unmatched by like anybody else in the vocal synth game. And like, I listen to their songs and I am like, I want to do this so bad. I wish I could release a song as good as this. And that's like a feeling I really just get sometimes when I'm listening to music. And that's how I know something is good. When I'm like, I wish I could do this.
I absolutely get that. I absolutely get that impulse. And as we're recording this, listeners, we're coming right off the heels of the Flavor Foley and ChulipP collab with Kaito.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I definitely like am not as into that one as I am to all the others. And, you know, I feel like they can't go too crazy because it is like a Project Sekai like commission song versus something like Raw Dog where they could just kind of go insane with it and not really have to worry about anything. But I still like it.
When you're starting off with a song like Butcher Vanity, I think just about anything would be a slight step down on the crazy scale. But
for sure, 100%. Yeah, I really love that album. Absolutely. Right now, the one that's my favorite for a while from them, and honestly my favorite Vocaloid song after it came out was Water the Roses. It just like shot to the top for me. Just because of how like pretty it was and just how like euphoric I felt listening to it. And also just how much it made me feel, really. And then also, but now I've been listening to Queen of Venus like over and over again, which is a song that I was like a bit disappointed about listening to it at first, but I've really gotten into it.
It's grown on you. Like the roses.
A lot. Yes. If we're talking other artists, I have to say Giga, of course, because as I mentioned, Plus Boy was like my favorite Vocaloid song when I was younger and like known as sort of the Len producer ever. So of course I have to say that. I really like Kira as well. Just absolutely fantastic work. Just love their production. And also, I don't know, I love gay bitches, so
Fair enough.
shout out Kira.
I mean, with
Yeah.
Giga and Kira, how exciting for you was it the first time you heard Getcha?
So good. So good.
Circling back, Flavor Foley, of course, they mostly worked with Synthesizer V more than Vocaloid, and all of your songs thus far have been Vocaloid songs, but I know that you are looking to branch out a bit. Before we started recording, you sent me a clip of something you're working on with Teto, and I'm just wondering, who are some of your favorite non-Vocaloid voice banks, whether it's for Synthesizer V, Utao, what have you?
I think that Eleanor Fort, is it Fort or Forte?
Forte,
Which one is
like
it?
the dynamic, like the volume
Okay,
thing.
yeah, Eleanor Forte just is maybe like the prettiest vocal synth ever, in my opinion. Just such a gorgeous tone, just unmatched. And like, you know, I'm more attached to other ones, but I just have to like admit that is so gorgeous. I really like Asterion. Asterion, kind of the hottest Vocaloid design, in my opinion. Just
I mean, all of the Eclipse Sounds designs are pretty, pretty
yeah.
impressive, but I definitely am picking up what you're putting down.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do have to say, my friend Puff that I mentioned, and I'm probably going to mention again, just because of how much we work together and just how close friends we are and how inherently tied me being a Vocaloid producer is to him. He is sort of like, his most popular videos are the ones where he's taking Free Moment and making it into Old Man Yowie. So like he's made some like pretty big covers. I think he was like one of the first people to really do like a Free Moment, like Butcher's Vanity cover, before it was like officially released by Rice. Yeah, so I have that attachment to Free Moment as well. Sometimes I just send like songs to Puff and I'm like, this is a Free Moment song. I need to see him be pathetic on this one. That's actually like, once Raw Dog came out, I just sent it to him and I was like, this is a Free Moment song. Need to hear him sing this. Need to. And that cover actually got released and fairly popular, so
what more could you ask for out of a vocal synth character? I mean, I've seen the joke on on Tumblr and stuff. It's like, over here in fandom, we're playing with our JPEGs like dolls. Here we are, we're playing with our voice banks like dolls.
Yeah, exactly. So true. And so those are my favorite those are my favorite V-synths, I'd say. I don't really know much about like the non-Vocaloid, non-synthesizer V like ones. I don't really know a lot outside of that really, so I can't say anything else.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, when it comes to Tao, there's 10 gazillion of them, so if you know a lot of them, then I'm impressed. And then with like Chevio, as the opposite problem, there's not very many of them that are well known, so if you don't know, then fair enough.
Yeah. So I'm really only just I'm not too far into that rabbit hole that I can really lock in on.
Yeah, always more to discover.
Mm-hmm,
and in the meantime, so we touched on this a little bit already, but as you said, your songs tend to have a bit of a story attached to them, and not to be all like, where do you get your ideas from? But I am curious about like where stories fit into your songwriting process, because you said it often comes sort of a bit after you've got some of the songs done, but have you ever had a story in your head already and sort of had it on the back burner waiting for the right kind of song to put it into?
I think so, definitely. I think that Cyborg's Dysmorphia is definitely the big one there. That is a song where I like started it and I knew exactly what I wanted out of it. And I think you can tell that because I started it with like sampling Fukase's voice in like the I like distorted it to make it sound like more of a synth. So I knew I wanted Fukase on that track immediately. And I knew sort of what I wanted him to sing, and then I just worked from there.
I'm so glad that you brought up Cyborg's Dysmorphia, because that was one of the two songs I wanted to ask about their story specifically. It was that and Bloodsuckers. Like, you think you could take me through what's going on with the stories for those two songs?
I would absolutely love to. Absolutely love to. So, cyborg's dysmorphia comes sort of from like this sentiment of transhumanism that I see a lot online, especially within like trans spaces, where everyone sort of wishes that they were like in a like the future so that they could like swap out all of their parts so like easily in order to sort of build like the ideal body. But when I'm thinking about that in relation to like my own body, I feel like I'd never be happy with it, no matter what I change. And so I really wanted to zero in on that and sort of that feeling that I had about that notion and sort of create a character who's essentially a futuristic plastic surgery addict. He's constantly dissatisfied with his body, and so he just keeps trying and trying, just buying and buying in this like capitalist hellscape, like cyberpunk dystopia, just over and over again, going bankrupt, just trying to find like a body that he loves. And that is very important to me to express, because as someone who has in the past had gender dysmorphia and also in the present has body dysmorphia, those things sort of mix very, very cleanly in order to create that vision and approach it from an interesting place. And I just sort of wanted to respond to the idea of transhumanism in that way.
That's super interesting. And if you'll bear with me going on a bit of a tangent for a second, I mean, surprise, surprise, the podcast host likes other podcasts. Are you at all familiar with the Magnus Archives?
I've heard of it, but I've never actually like taken the time to listen to it. To be honest, I'm going to be so real with you. I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts.
Hey, that's fair enough. It reminded me quite strongly of, so there's the Magnus Archives and there's sort of a spin-off, the Magnus Protocol. I think the creators jokingly called it a sidequel because it's like marketed as a sequel, but it's really stories that went in a different direction. Anyway, the second episode of Protocol concerns a woman who gained the ability to like supernaturally modify her appearance. And I won't get into spoilers, but things go way too far very quickly. And in that case, it's very much like a magical sort of thing. Like she's got a painting, and if she adjusts the painting, her body changes accordingly. And just, it seems to touch on similar themes. So, you know, if you don't listen to podcasts much, fair enough. I'm not going to say you should totally listen to it now, but it's just, if those themes resonate, that's what came to mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, also like shapeshifters were another inspiration that definitely went into that, because I'm a U-Quiz addict a little bit. My last job, I had so much downtime that I would literally just sit there and use my phone and take as many U-Quizzes as I could. And like a very common one was like, what would you want your superpower to be? And shapeshifter was like always an option. And so I'd like think through it and I'd be like, no, when I'm picking those types of things and I'm thinking, what superpower would I want? I'm always like, how would this affect me mentally? That's how I sort of think about it. Versus what would be the coolest?
Yeah, cool factor versus unintended consequences.
Exactly, yes.
Circling back, could you tell me a bit about Bloodsucker now?
Bloodsucker is probably the closest that I've ever come to just genuinely my songs that I write with my voice. Because most of my songs that I write myself, like in my own voice, non-vocaloid, are about my borderline personality disorder, to be like perfectly clear with you, because that's something I've struggled a lot with in my life. It's something I've really had to overcome. And when I was in that, like the depths and writing songs was like my only self-expression, I was really writing about that a lot. And with Bloodsucker, it was sort of the same thing, except I wanted to fictionalize it a bit. And so I came up with this character who's like a vampire, who's like a bloodthirsty beast, but it's pathetic. They're like a tragic sort of character because they're sadistic. They're like constantly like looking for a fix, and they're like a bit egomaniacal, but at the same time, they're so deeply lonely, and they're like killing people left and right, like keeping people hostage for their own amusement. Just a sick, like twisted vampire individual who just because I feel like sometimes as a person with borderline personality disorder who latches on to people so strongly and just wants their attention all the time, because without it, I feel so hollow. I definitely feel like I'm sucking the life out of them a little bit. I feel like I'm taking all of their energy for myself. And so in that way, I sort of like relate to this vampire, and sort of the character I was writing in that song was sort of my worst impulses just all meshed together to create this character. And I really wanted you to sort of like hate the character when you're listening to it and like be like, oh, like vicious, just maybe like a bit badass, just a tiny little bit. But mostly I just wanted you to tell that they were sad, that they were lonely. And so that's where it comes out of.
Yeah. You know, I did listen to most of your music ahead of the podcast, and listening to Bloodsucker, like, I don't want to sound judgy because that's not where it was coming from, but it was definitely like, I listened to that as like, clearly there is some kind of personal issue being worked through via metaphor here. So definitely your intentions came across, I think. So you didn't take the metaphor so far to a place of fantasy that it was impossible to tell what you were getting at. I think your feelings in this case came through quite clearly.
Okay, I'm glad. I like that song. Honestly, like, I'm a bit insecure about it because on my channel it has the most views and it has the least comments and the least likes. And I think that's because my friend Dubuk, who made, not to name drop, but made the game like 811, which is fairly popular, like did the art for it, cover art. Very grateful for that. But like, I feel like that sort of got all the attention, and that's like the only reason people really clicked on it or listened to it. So it makes me like feel like a bit ashamed of it, because like in the back of my mind, I'm like, is that song even good? Like, maybe there's a reason the people don't really listen to it. So I'm glad that like my emotions came through at least.
I mean, that's an understandable insecurity, but I will say, literally the next question I was planning to ask was that I quite enjoyed the pixel art that you've got in some of your art and stuff. So is the pixel art just sort of like as a matter of that's what you're artistically capable of, like it's a convenience thing, or are you deliberately choosing kind of like the retro gaming style?
It is, I will say it is a matter of convenience mostly. It's a skill that I know because I've tried to do RPG Maker projects like a few times, and so I've had to sort of learn pixel art for it.
Classic.
And also, I sometimes just, when I was starting out, and a lot of the time, I don't want just like a still image. I want there to be something interesting going on screen. And so like animation is pretty easy, but it is just mostly like a matter of capability. And just, that's what I know. That's what I do. And if I don't have like the money to commission people, then I'd rather do it myself, you know? Because I really hate music artists who are like, oh, I don't have money, so I'm going to AI generate.
Oh, Lord.
I hate that. I hate that instinct.
Yeah, let's not get too far onto that subject, because I will spin myself up into a tizzy of rage, and this podcast will stop being fun to listen to. But so, suffice to say, I agree with you. Work with what you got, and in this case, what you got is pixel art, and pixel art is delightful. Some of the most iconic Vocaloid videos ever have been pixel art. I mean, like, I did my episode on Sasakura UK and Hello Planet. You know, it's great.
My next few releases aren't really going to have pixel art, though, because just like by the manner of things, my videos tend to do better when there's like non-pixel art involved, when it's made by commissioners or friends. And, you know, at the end of the day, I do this because I love it, but also at the same time, I want people to listen to what I make. And if like people's art is what draws people to it, then like I'll do it. Because it was just like a matter of convenience to do pixel art and not really like any intentional artistic choice. That's just sort of how it is, I guess.
And fair enough. And the thing is, commissioning people, like, we in the vocal synth sphere can certainly think of a few very high-profile examples of people who are capable of doing both very impressive art and very impressive music. I mean, my mind shifts to Ghost, Hachi, a few others and stuff. Most musical artists out there in the world do not do their own album art. They ask other people to do it. Like, that is the norm for, like, 95% of the music world out there. So
Mhm.
you're in good company.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, it feels good to see some characters drawn by other people because, you know, at the end of the day, I am a vocal synth fan. I like seeing these characters in different outfits, you know, it makes me happy.
We're playing with
Um,
JPEGs.
exactly, yes. Especially with Len, the song that I am working on, the art that's getting drawn, the Len outfit, the Len design, so good. Just made me like so happy just seeing like the sketch for the first time because I was like, you're brilliant. Your mind's amazing. Thank you.
Insert Lady Gaga meme here. Amazing, unforgettable, fantastic. I don't remember the next one. Adjective, adjective, adjective.
Exactly. Eat it, shit it, throw it out, throw it in the garbage. That's like, I think that's part of it, at least, the meme. I don't know.
Spread the love, support your artist friends, etc.
Yes.
Speaking of playing with JPEGs, I want to touch on everybody's favorite Vocaloid gacha game for a second, and we did touch on this a bit with Cyborg Dysmorphia. Listeners, a bit of preamble for this, since it needs a bit of context. Project Sekai Colorful Stage, I've mentioned it a few times, because, frankly, it's a big part of the vocal synth scene right now. And my main interest in the game is pretty much the music, but the story is quite engaging, and I, like a lot of fans, consider the character Mizuki Akiyama to be one of my favorite characters. And for those unaware, Mizuki is trans, assigned male at birth, referred to in the official English translation with they, them, and sometimes she, her pronouns. And I know that there's been weird discourse and people have gotten weird about the fact that the game has never assigned exact terminology, but not gonna split hairs. Mizuki is trans, it's a big part of the story and stuff. And ChulipP, I did go through your Tumblr a little bit while prepping the questions for this interview, and I came across that post you made about what Mizuki means to you as a trans feminine vocal synth fan and creator. And it was a long post, I'm not going to read it out to people, I'll spare people that, but just, can you talk to us a bit about that subject and just sort of, I know trans representation is sparse in media anyway, so it's a big deal to have a trans character at all. But I know you touched on some particular elements of Mizuki's portrayal that really resonated with you, and I was hoping you could share some of that with us now.
So I was a bit hesitant about Project Sekai at first because it just like looked a bit too Love Live to me, you know? And I'm not a Love Live person. Like, no shame to those who like it, but it's just not for me, I guess. And so when I saw Project Sekai, I was like, I don't know how I feel about like virtual singers and voice actresses singing together. I don't think it sounds great. Like when I would look up songs, I would see Project Sekai version and I'd listen to them, and I just wasn't a big fan of how they interacted. So I was a bit hesitant, but I really wanted a free like rhythm game on my phone, and so I downloaded Project Sekai to play the songs. And I knew that Mizuki was like trans, some flavor of trans, and I think it was actually around the time that Mizu 5, which is the event in which Mizuki gets outed to her friends. Spoilers, maybe? I don't know.
I feel like most people in the vocal synth sphere, if they don't know the exact details of that event, know broadly that this was a thing that happened because pretty much the entire fandom collectively lost their minds about it.
And I read through the transcript that was made, and I was like, wow, like, actually, this is, like, impressive. I wasn't expecting, like, this. Because a lot of the time in media, when you get trans representation, and especially in, like, a lot of anime, it's usually very surface level. There's very few chances where struggles really get explored, and especially, like, such a niche subject as being trans and not telling your friends in high school, which is something that I've been through. And I will say I transitioned when I was 12 years old, which is about the time that I listened to Vocaloid music. And I got medical care, thank you, Canada. And so I was able to get into like a position where I could pass, and I decided I wanted to go to a new high school, and I was going to be stealth. Stealth means you don't let anyone know you're trans, you just act as if you were a cis woman. And that was a nightmare for me personally. Passing is great. I definitely have been blessed in my life with the ability to pass, because it saves me a lot of harassment. However, being stealth was just a terrible experience, just filled with paranoia.
Secrets are
And
stressful.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was sort of all of the friendships I made during high school sort of came with like this asterisk of, oh, they don't know who I really am, so I'll never know how they feel about it.
Which kind of feels like Mizuki Akiyama in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically, I feel like that captured that feeling so well, is that she knows she loves her friends, and she knows in her head that they will probably accept her, except at the same time, she can't take that step because she's afraid that it won't happen. But at the same time, she's also afraid that she'll be looked at differently and that that dynamic will change. And that is such a real thing. It felt really, good to just be acknowledged as the gender you are by everyone. And so I understand that. But also at the same time, I think that it is such a lonely experience. Just horrible. And not to even mention just how paranoid you are 24/7. I think I mentioned that. Just thinking like, oh, like they'll be able to tell because of this. They'll be able to tell because of that. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do that. Otherwise, people will find out. And I just felt that Mizuki's experience is something that I was never able to see in media. It matched my own so perfectly that it was actually just so crazy to me that it even existed, and it existed in the game that it did.
What do you mean there's a detailed, nuanced, authentic feeling experience from the Miku Gacha game?
From the Miku Gacha game, and not only that, delving into a very specific subset of the trans experience that not many people really feel, I feel like being able to go stealth in high school is such a rare thing. Like, I feel like most people, if they're capable, don't do it. I feel like this was such a little niche, tidbit that just matched my rare experience. And so I'm a bit puzzled, honestly. I don't know how they were able to capture that well when it is a topic that I don't think any other media that I can think of has really talked about. Because I feel like a lot of the time trans representation is very surface level. You don't really get to explore the characters. I feel like there's this instinct nowadays where trans characters need to be depicted perfectly. They need to be thrown in, and they need to represent the trans community in the most positive light they can be, to the point where it takes away from telling stories. And when the stories are actually told and we take time to develop these trans characters, it usually doesn't match my experience, and that's just the nature of what I've been through, because not a lot of people that I know have been through that as well. So yeah.
Well, and that's sort of the thing, right? In the name of pleasing everybody, you're probably gonna please nobody. And also, I just find with writing more generally, a lot of the best examples of representation out there are the ones that really drill into the specifics of it. So, not necessarily everyone who sees it is going to be able to relate, but because you have made it specific, it lends authenticity to it, which is, in its own way, resonates more. Relatability is, I don't want to say overrated, because this whole conversation has been about, the way that you could relate and that mattered, but I do think that being generic doesn't help. Specificity is really, I think, the key to making sure that the story lands the way it should, and making sure that in the places where the viewer can relate, it needs that underlying foundation of these feelings. They feel correct, true, real, basically. Even if it is a fictional character, it feels like it could be real.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, that obviously got a little heavy just by nature of the subject matter, but thank you so much for sharing. On a lighter note, like I mentioned at the top, you've got a new song coming out pretty soon. And then just more generally, have you got any exciting plans for your music in the near future?
So by the time that this video's out, I will have had another song on my channel. As I mentioned, it is my first experience working with Synthesizer V. It's a song I really love. Probably like my favorite song I've worked on in a while. It is called Jester, and I think you should go and listen to that. I really do. I think you should do that. But yeah, Tenchi Crisis Line will also be out in the weeks following this, and so if you like Jester, you should stay tuned for that one. It was fun to work on. I really collaborated with, it was probably like the most collaborative experience I've ever had with vocal synth, because I wrote it with my friend Puff, who, you know, does my tuning for like a lot of the scenarios just because of experience. I've mentioned that name like 8 times. I apologize. But we worked together.
No need to apologize. Like, this is shout out to your friends. Shout out to all the friends. Yeah. I love promoting the pals.
I'd like to shout out Len, because I would not be such a big Vocaloid fan if it wasn't for Len. I didn't really get the chance to talk about it, but that's my Skrunkly. That's my guy that I shake around in a little paper bag.
Your Blorbo and the Plinko. I'm young. Yeah. I'm hip with the fandom lingo.
Yeah, just a big fan of him. I feel like a lot of other Vocaloids, I just don't get that same sort of I want to put him in the scenarios feeling. I don't know. There's something about him. He's silly. I like him. So shout out to him. Who else? Shout out to Dubu. Play 811. Yeah, it's yay.
Nice. Well, the point about Len leads me pretty perfectly into my last question. Obviously, nothing will ever replace Len, but a question I plan to ask pretty much everyone that I interview. If you could get anyone in the whole world to record a voice bank just to have, you know, who you think has the most amazing voice ever that you would love to have as a voice bank, who would you get?
So I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a big Cara Bonito fan, and I'd love to see Sarah Bonito because her tone is very unique. I feel like it would be so interesting to see it in a synthesizer because it's got its very distinct nature to it, and also I feel like I would love to see what you could really do with her voice as far as, you know, tuning and really making it sound, you know, vocally perfect almost. Because I feel like her voice is a bit unrefined as is. That's no knock to her. Love her vocals. But it's definitely not like she's the best vocalist in the world. If we're talking about the best vocalist in the world, Rina Sawayama, would love to have her in a voice bank. Her voice is so gorgeous. Just absolutely gorgeous. And I would also like Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine.
Oh yeah, that's again, a thought.
Just the most gorgeous voice. Just beautiful, unique, but also just an incredible level of vocal talent that is honestly stunning. Yeah.
That sounds like fun. Answers. Sorry, wait, I talked over you.
No, I just said those are my answers. No,
and they're great answers, so I think we're about ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on for the interview. Listeners, I'll be putting links to ChulipP's music in the transcript for your perusal. And, yeah, I look forward to seeing what you come up with next, ChulipP.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really love to get the chance to talk about something I'm so passionate about. And especially as, like, a smaller creator, I really didn't think I'd get, like, an opportunity like this. And it just makes me feel really great. And it makes me feel like what I'm doing matters. And it just makes me really happy. So thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be thanking each other back and forth all night. So instead, yeah, take care. See you around.
Yeah. Yeah, bye.
Special thanks to ChulipP for coming on the show, and to my mom for getting the cat to quiet down. If you're a creator in the vocal synth world and you'd be interested in featuring, you can reach me at happysynthesizerspod@gmail.com, and we'll see if we can make some arrangements. For the rest of you, please like and follow the pod, and leave a nice review if you're feeling generous. It's by far the easiest way to help a small podcast like this gain some ground. You can find the full suite of listening platforms, social media, transcripts, and sources at linktree/happysynthesizers. Happy Synthesizers is written and produced by Kay Judson. The theme music is Ievan Polka, arranged with inspiration from Lloyd Tuma and Automania.